I'll make this quick because I don't know how long I've got before it starts again. I'm stationed at a Snowbound Research Base in the Arctic Circle. 8 of us were sent here. 2 months into the mission, I'm the only one left. And someone, I don't even know what to call it, has been circling the base every night. It doesn't knock, it doesn't scream, it just waits. The generator hums low behind me as I speak into this recorder. If you hear my voice, you'll think I sound tired. That's because I am. Sleep hasn't been real for me in weeks. I close my eyes and I hear it in the snow. A dragging, a pacing. Sometimes it sounds close, like it's just beyond the wall. Sometimes I swear it's inside already. I need you to understand what it felt like to be here before things went wrong. The base wasn't much, just 4 connected modules raised on steel stilts to keep them above the drifts. Metal corridors that groaned in the wind. Windows covered in ice crystals so thick you had to scratch them clear just to see a few feet outside. Everything smelled like rust, diesel, and the sour tang of too many men sharing too little space. My job was simple on paper. Meteorological logging, daily weather balloons, snowpack depth, data transmission to Anchorage. Reality was monotony, broken only by the occasional laugh. A bad card game, or the kind of silence that makes you feel like the air itself is pressing against your skull. You ever hear true silence? Not city quiet, not rural quiet, Arctic silence. It's a different breed. Out there, sound doesn't carry the same way. Even the crunch of your boots in snow feels swallowed. You walk 20 feet from the base, and the silence gets so complete, you start hearing your own pulse. That's what broke most of us first, the quiet. The strange part, the quiet didn't last. It started the 3rd week, right when the sun dipped below the horizon for the season. Permanent night. We were drinking burnt coffee, trying to ignore each other's chewing, when Carter, our radio tech, stiffened. Said he heard something on the HF band, a whisper, like someone far away calling his name. We laughed at him. Said it was interference, or maybe he was stir-crazy. But later that night, I heard it too. Not on the radio, in the vents. I was lying in my bunk, staring at the frost collecting on the ceiling, when I caught it. Soft, like a man clearing his throat, followed by 3 distinct syllables. Not words I knew, almost like a language curling back on itself. I thought it was Carter pulling a prank, whispering into the ductwork, so I slammed my fist on the wall and told him to cut it out. He didn't answer. The next morning, Carter looked worse than me. Bloodshot eyes, said he hadn't slept, said the whispering kept repeating until dawn. Nobody believed him. I wanted to. That was the first contradiction. Things we couldn't explain, but tried to rationalize. Because once you admit something doesn't make sense out here, it unravels everything else you're holding on to. The storm rolled in 2 days later. Wind speeds that made the whole structure groan like a dying ship. Snow battering the steel siding like fists. We were trapped inside for 72 hours. And that's when we started hearing the steps. Not inside, not yet, but outside, slow, heavy, pacing around the base. Every man in the station admitted to hearing them, but none of us said it out loud until the 3rd night, when Olson cracked. He jumped up at dinner, slammed his tray on the floor, and shouted, "It's circling us!" His voice cracked like a boy's. Nobody laughed this time. We all sat there, bowls of canned stew going cold, pretending we didn't notice the faint crunch, crunch, crunch on the snow outside. Tell me, if you were me, if you were any of us, would you have opened the door? Just to check? Just to make sure it was nothing? I didn't. None of us did. We locked every latch, taped over the vents, and tried to ignore the pacing. But ignoring only works so long, because by the fourth day, something left tracks. When the storm finally eased, we opened the airlock, and there they were, circling the base in wide, deliberate loops. Not boots, not animal. Too long, too narrow, like someone dragging their heel over the snow, but with toes that split at the end like claws. And deep, much deeper than any normal footfall. Carter threw up right there in the airlock. Olson crossed himself. The others argued. Wind distortion, melting and freezing patterns, hallucination. I wanted to believe any of those things, but the truth was standing in front of us, clear as the cold air biting our faces. Something had walked around the base. And the strangest part? There weren't just circles. The tracks stopped in one place, directly below my window. I didn't sleep the night we found those tracks. The others tried. You could hear the restless shifting of bodies in their bunks, the groan of mattress springs under men too afraid to admit they were scared. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, counting every faint groan in the walls and every whistle of wind through the seams. But the sound that kept me awake wasn't the storm. It was the memory of those prints outside my window. I kept replaying them in my head, the way the snow had pressed down deeper than human weight should have allowed. The long, dragging pattern that didn't quite match anything in my memory. I'd hunted as a kid, deer, elk. I knew the way animals moved. This wasn't that. Around 3 a.m., when the silence pressed hardest, I heard it again. The pacing. Faint, deliberate, circling the base. Only this time, I knew it wasn't the storm. The storm was gone. The air was still. And yet, crunch, crunch, crunch. I pressed my pillow over my ears, but you can't block a sound that isn't exactly sound. You ever notice that? Sometimes a noise bypasses your ears and rattles around inside your skull. That's how it felt, like it was inside me. By breakfast, nobody wanted to eat. Carter smoked half a pack before 9. Olson started reading his Bible out loud, his voice shaking over every psalm. The others, Miller, Harper, Sloan, they just kept their eyes down, moving their food around the plates like kids trying to avoid a beating. Then Harper snapped. He said if we sat in here one more night, we'd lose our minds. Said we should follow the tracks, see where they led. Olson argued it was blasphemy to go chasing shadows. Sloan reminded us of regulations. Never leave base perimeter without direct orders. But Harper didn't care. He strapped on his snowshoes, slung his rifle, and dared any of us to stop him. Nobody did. So he went out. I can still see the way his headlamp bobbed through the snow as he trudged away, shrinking smaller and smaller until the night swallowed him. The beam flickered once, like a firefly dying, then disappeared altogether. We told ourselves it was distance, batteries, anything but what we all felt, that something had extinguished him. 2 hours later, the storm returned, sudden and brutal, and we knew Harper wasn't coming back. That night, The pacing got louder. You think I'm exaggerating, don't you? That I'm embellishing for effect? I wish I were. I'd give anything for this to be just a story. But the steps outside weren't just louder. They were angrier, faster, circling tighter. Every man in the base sat awake, watching frost creep across the windows, listening as it came around and around. Then, bang, a single slam against the outer wall, strong enough to rattle the mugs on the table. Carter screamed. Miller grabbed his wrench. Olson prayed louder. I sat frozen, breath puffing white in the dim light, because I realized something in that moment, something that nearly made me piss myself. It knew where we were, not just circling. It was hunting, testing, probing, like it was trying to figure out the weak spots. Would you have opened the door then, to end the suspense, to face it? Or would you have sat there like me, pretending stillness was safety? We didn't move until morning. When the storm cleared again, Harper's tracks were gone, erased. But in their place, leading away from the base, into the white expanse, were new prints, not the same dragging ones. These were sharper, deeper, closer together, like it had been running, and they led right into the horizon. No end. Carter asked the question none of us wanted to hear. What if it got him? Nobody answered. After that, time blurred. Day and night didn't matter when there was no sun. We kept busy where we could. Data logs, equipment checks, pointless chores to trick our minds into pretending. There was still order. But under it all was the truth. We were just killing time. The whispering returned too. Not just in the vents this time. Sometimes in the hall. Sometimes behind us in the mess. Always faint, just low enough that when you whipped your head around, there'd be nothing. Carter swore he heard his mother's voice calling him. Olson said it was demons. Me? I didn't know, but I noticed a pattern. The whispers always came before the steps. One night, I woke to a sound so soft, I thought I'd dreamed it. My name, clear as day, drawn out like someone savoring it. Daniel. That's my name. I never told you that, did I? Daniel Reeve. Meteorologist, or what's left of one. I sat up, heart hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. My bunk curtain was drawn, but I could see the faint shadow of movement under the crack at the floor. Slow, deliberate. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. And then the shadow was gone. By morning, Olson was missing. No struggle. No sound, just gone. His bunk empty, sheets still warm. The airlock had been unlatched, snow blowing in through the crack. His boots were missing. We found tracks leading away into the dark. Human this time, Olson's. But beside them, running parallel, were the other prints, the long, clawed ones. 2 sets. Walking side by side. We didn't say it out loud, but we all thought the same thing. Olson hadn't been dragged. He'd walked. The prints proved it. His boot marks were steady, not staggered. No signs of struggle, no signs of him being pulled. And those other tracks, those impossibly deep clawed ones, matched his stride perfectly. Like they were accompanying him. I wanted to believe he'd gone mad, that the whispers had fried his brain, and he'd wandered off. But the idea of him walking willingly beside that thing made my stomach twist harder than anything else. Because if it could talk him into leaving, what chance did the rest of us have? Carter lost it next. He kept pacing the corridor, smoking until the place stank like tar, muttering under his breath. Said he could hear his mother clearer now. Not just whispers, but sentences. He swore she told him things he couldn't have known. Details about his childhood home, about the way she died. Things he said he'd forgotten, but came rushing back in her voice. Miller called him a liar. Sloan tried to calm him. I just listened, because part of me wanted it to be true. I hadn't heard my mother since she passed, but sometimes, when the wind cut just right, I swore I could almost make out her laugh. You ever want something so badly that your brain will trick you into believing? It's there. That's what it felt like. By the fourth day without Olson, Carter was a wreck. He stopped eating. His hands shook so badly he couldn't roll a cigarette. And then, during a power check, he looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and whispered, "It's not outside anymore." I asked him what he meant. He just pointed to his chest. That night, the pacing didn't come. No footsteps, no banging, just silence. But I almost wished for the noise, because the quiet was worse. It felt loaded. Like holding your breath too long. Like the second before lightning strikes. We took shifts, sitting by the airlock with rifles in our laps, waiting for something to happen. Miller was on first watch. When I relieved him at 2 a.m., he looked pale, sweating through his parka, even in the freezing air. I asked if he'd seen anything. He shook his head, but his eyes told a different story. He didn't sleep after that. None of us really did. When the footsteps finally came back, they were different, faster, erratic, not circling, but darting in broken patterns, back and forth like a predator testing a cage. The sound made my teeth ache. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where? Into the white nothing? Into its arms? Then the banging started again. Not once this time, over and over. First against the west wall, then the east, then directly under the floor. Each impact made the steel vibrate. Dust fell from the ceiling vents. Carter clutched his head and sobbed, saying, "She wants me to let her in." Sloan grabbed him by the collar and shook him until his teeth clacked. "It's not her," he growled. "Whatever you're hearing, it's not her." But Carter only smiled through his tears. How do you know? That question stuck in me like a thorn. How did we know? Out here, with nothing but ice and dark, who were we to decide what was real and what wasn't? The banging stopped as suddenly as it began. And then came the knock. A single, gentle rap on the airlock door. 3 times, like a polite guest asking permission. We froze. No one moved. The sound was so ordinary, it was obscene. Like hearing a nursery rhyme in a morgue. Miller's face went gray. He raised his rifle, but before he could aim, Carter bolted. I shouted, but he was already sprinting down the corridor, fumbling with the latch. By the time we reached him, he'd thrown the airlock wide open. Snow blasted in, stinging my eyes. Beyond the threshold was only night. Black, endless, suffocating. And Carter was gone. No scream, no struggle. Just gone. We slammed the door shut, triple locked it, shoved the steel bar into place. Miller cursed until his voice broke. Sloan punched the wall hard enough to split his knuckles. I just stood there, staring at the frost creeping across the inside of the window, and thought about that knock. Why knock? Why not break the door down? It had the strength. We'd all heard it, unless it wanted us to invite it in. That was when I started keeping the knife under my pillow. After Carter, the pacing stopped for good. We didn't hear it anymore. But that didn't make things better. It made things worse, because silence in the Arctic isn't absence, it's waiting. We knew it was still out there. We just didn't know what it was waiting for. Sloan tried to keep order, forced us to follow routines. Data collection, equipment checks, meal prep. But it was hollow. We weren't working. We were rehearsing normalcy while waiting to die. Miller stopped talking altogether, his face a mask of ash. Sloan filled the silence with orders, but even he had a tremor in his voice. Me? I kept thinking about Olson walking side by side with it. Carter opening the door without hesitation. The way it seemed to know exactly which string to pull in each of us. What string was it waiting to pull in me? The answer came sooner than I wanted. Because 3 nights after Carter disappeared, I woke to the sound of my mother's voice. Not a whisper this time, not faint, clear, warm, coming from right outside my bunk curtain. Danny, open your eyes. I didn't want to open my eyes. God help me, every instinct screamed not to. But when it's your mother's voice, the exact pitch, the exact softness, it's like your body acts before your brain can stop it. I pulled the curtain back. Nobody there. Just the dim glow of the emergency bulb, painting the corridor outside in a sickly red. But the voice hadn't stopped. Danny, come outside. I've missed you. I sat frozen, knife clutched so tight the handle dug grooves into my palm. My breath fogged the cold air. I kept telling myself it couldn't be her. She'd been dead for 8 years, buried in Ohio. But when you're alone in the dark, reason doesn't stand a chance against longing. I swung my legs off the bunk. My boots touched the metal floor with a hollow clang that echoed far too loud. Miller stirred in his sleep across the room, muttering something I couldn't catch. I thought about waking him, but what would I even say? That my dead mother was calling me from the hallway? I crept to the corridor. The whisper drew me toward the airlock. Every step it grew sweeter, more insistent. Please, Danny, just a minute, just 1 minute. I'll make it all better. And for a second, I believed it. I believed if I opened that door, she'd be standing there, wrapped in her red winter coat, cheeks pink from the cold, smiling the way she used to when I came home from school. I reached the latch. My hand shook. Then Sloan's voice thundered behind me. Reeve, I spun. He was standing there, wild-eyed, rifle slung across his chest. His face was pale, sweat glistening despite the cold. Don't, he said, voice low, urgent. Don't open it. It's not her. The sweetness of the voice outside curdled instantly. The tone sharpened, harsher, desperate. Danny, don't listen to him. He doesn't care about you. I do. Just open the door. My knees buckled. I pressed my forehead against the steel, torn in two. Directions, like someone had hooked ropes into my ribs and pulled opposite ways. Then Sloan grabbed me, yanked me back, slammed the latch shut, and dragged me down the corridor. The voice outside turned into a shriek, not a woman's, not human. A piercing, metallic screech that rattled every bolt in the base. It echoed through the ducts, made the light bulbs flicker, made Miller bolt upright in his bunk screaming. And then it stopped, just like that, gone. I collapsed, gasping like I'd surfaced from drowning. Sloan knelt in front of me, gripping my shoulders. His eyes weren't angry, they were terrified. You can't listen, he whispered. That's how it gets in. For the first time since it began, I realized Sloan wasn't just afraid for himself. He was afraid for me. But something in his words chilled me deeper than the Arctic air. "Gets in." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. That day, none of us spoke much. Miller kept staring at the floor, lips moving like he was silently arguing with himself. I thought about asking what he was hearing, but I already knew. It had found his string too. The base felt smaller by then. The corridors tighter. Every creak of the walls, every groan of the wind made me flinch. The generator's steady hum, once a comfort, now sounded like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. That night, Sloan set double guard. He didn't trust me alone. He was right not to. Because even after what happened, part of me still wanted to open that door. I don't know if you've ever wanted two opposite things at once. To live and die. To run and stay. That's what it felt like. Around midnight, Miller broke. I woke to the airlock alarm blaring. By the time I got there, the inner door was wide open, snow blasting in, alarms howling red. Miller's boots were gone. His parka too. Sloan swore, punched the control panel, and sealed it back. But Miller was already out in the storm. We looked through the frosted glass and saw him just past the perimeter lights, walking steady into the dark. And beside him, Christ, beside him was a shape, not clear, not solid, like heat waves rising off asphalt, a distortion in the snowstorm, walking in perfect rhythm with him. Taller than him, wider, its outline bent and stretched, like it didn't fit in our world. I blinked and it was gone. But Miller wasn't. He kept walking until the lights swallowed him. Sloan slammed the shutters down and turned on me, eyes burning. "You see what it does? You see how it takes them?" I couldn't answer. My throat locked up, because I had seen, and I knew, sooner or later, it would come for me too. The storm raged 3 days straight. Just me and Sloan left. We rationed food, barely spoke, slept in shifts. Every so often, I'd catch him staring at me, rifle across his lap, like he wasn't sure if he was guarding me or guarding from me. The whispers didn't stop. They came through the vents, through the walls, even through the pipes. Sometimes it was my mother again. Sometimes my father. Once, chillingly, it was my own voice. And every time, Sloan would murmur the same thing to himself, like a mantra. Don't let it in. Don't let it in. But on the fourth night, something changed. Because this time, when the voice came, it wasn't whispering. It was laughing. You don't know what madness feels like until you've heard your own laugh coming from the wrong place. It started faint, drifting down the corridor like it was caught in the air ducts. My laugh, but twisted, stretched as if something was practicing the sound and couldn't quite get it right. Sloan and I froze in the mess hall. We stared at each other, both pale, both pretending not to recognize it. But when it came again, closer, sharper, echoing like it was right outside the door, he slammed the lights off and motioned for me to keep silent. We sat in the dark, holding our breath, while that thing chuckled and rattled. Around the base, sometimes it was my laugh, sometimes Sloan's. Once, horribly, it shifted back to Carter's, deep and broken, like he was choking on it. It circled for hours. The laughter never faded, never tired. And then, as dawn technically arrived, though we'd never see the sun again, It just stopped. Sloan lit a cigarette with shaking hands. He didn't even smoke before all this. The ember glowed in the dark like a warning beacon. "You know what it's doing, don't you?" he asked. I shook my head, even though I did. "It's wearing us down," he said. "It doesn't need to break in. It just waits for us to open the door ourselves." I wanted to argue, to tell him we could outlast it. But he wasn't wrong. One by one, it had peeled us away. Harper, Olson, Carter, Miller. All it had to do was talk long enough, sound familiar enough, and we'd follow. That day, I caught Sloan watching the door too long. He had dark circles under his eyes, his hands twitching. When he caught me staring, he said, "If it calls me, you stop me. You hear me, Reeve? No matter what I say." I promised him I would. But promises don't mean much when your mind is splintering. The next night, the banging returned. Not random this time, rhythmic, like knocking in a pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, over and over. Sloan went white. "It's code," he whispered. I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He tapped the table in return. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. The thing outside stopped. Waited. Then tapped back. My blood turned to ice. "Don't answer it," I hissed. But Sloan leaned closer to the wall, like he could hear better that way. His lips moved as he tried to interpret the rhythm. "It's spelling something," he muttered. "God help me. It knows Morse." The thought hit me like a blade between the ribs. It had been listening to us, learning, copying our voices, our laughs, and now our codes. That was the moment I knew this wasn't some dumb beast. This was intelligence, patient, cold, and then it spelled his name, clear as a bell. Sloane. He staggered back from the wall, face drained of blood. I grabbed him, shook him, begged him not to answer. His whole body trembled as the knocks repeated, spelling his name again and again. Finally, he shouted, "Shut up!" and slammed his fist against the metal. The knocking stopped, but later that night, I woke to the sound of the latch turning. Sloan stood in the airlock, his back to me, rifle slung over his shoulder. His hand rested on the lever, ready to pull it. I rushed him, slammed him into the wall, wrestled the rifle from his grip. He fought like a man possessed, screaming that his brother was out there, that he could hear him calling. "There's nothing out there but it," I shouted, pinning him down. He sobbed, spit flying, muscles straining under me. For a moment, I thought he'd kill me, just to get out that door. Finally, he went limp, broken. I dragged him back to the bunks, tied his wrists with a length of electrical cord. He didn't resist. He just stared at the ceiling, whispering his brother's name over and over until he fell silent. That silence didn't last long, because the next morning, the laughter returned. But this time, it wasn't outside. It came from the vents, from inside the base. I snapped awake, heart pounding, knife in hand. The sound crawled through the ducts, skittering from one end of the station to the other. Sloan jerked upright, his wrists still bound, eyes wide. We both listened, and the realization sank in like poison. It wasn't circling anymore. It had found a way inside. Sloan whispered, "You have to kill me if it takes me." I didn't answer, because I was starting to wonder if it already had. The days stretched long and brittle. Every creak in the walls made me flinch. I kept glancing at Sloan. watching the way his lips moved, silently, as if in conversation. Sometimes he nodded at nothing, like he was listening. That night, I heard the whisper again. But it wasn't my mother this time. It was Sloan, right outside my bunk curtain, his voice as clear as if he were kneeling beside me. "Reeve, untie me. You can trust me. I need your help." But when I looked across the room, I saw him lying there, still bound, staring at me with eyes that begged me not to believe it. That's when I knew. It didn't just want us outside anymore. It wanted in here with us. I stopped sleeping after that. How could I? When my own bunk had become a stage for its tricks. One night it was my mother, the next, my father, then Sloan, then Carter, then voices I didn't even recognize. Sometimes soft, sometimes pleading, sometimes mocking. It wasn't just sound anymore either. I started seeing things in the corners of my vision. Shadows bending the wrong way. The shimmer of heat where no heat existed. Shapes tall enough to brush the ceiling beams. Sloan was unraveling faster than me. I caught him gnawing at the electrical cord around his wrists, teeth bloody, eyes wild. I reinforced the knots, told him it was for his own good. He begged me to let him free, promised he wouldn't open the door. But I couldn't take the chance. You ever look at someone you trusted and realize you're more afraid of them than the thing outside? That's what it came to with Sloan. By the second day of his restraints, he stopped fighting. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, whispering to himself. I thought maybe he'd given up. But then I leaned closer one time, and I realized he wasn't whispering to himself. He was whispering to it. I don't know how long the days stretched after that. The clock said time was moving, but it all blurred into one long smear of darkness. The generator hummed, the wind screamed, and the laughter and whispers crawled through the walls until I couldn't tell which sounds were real and which were in my skull. Then came the night of the knock again. 3 raps, polite, measured, right at the airlock. I sat with the rifle across my lap, every muscle taut, while Sloan shifted in his bunk, eyes gleaming in the half-light. "That's for me," he whispered. I told him to shut up. The knocking came again, louder, then softer, then louder, like it was playing with us. Finally, it stopped, but Sloan didn't. He laughed, a low, broken laugh that made the hair on my arms rise. I told him if he didn't stop, I'd gag him. He just looked at me, bloodshot eyes burning, and said, "You think you've lasted this long on your own strife? It's keeping you, testing you. It wants to see who breaks first." He wasn't wrong. That's the worst part, because that night I heard it whisper to me again. But this time it wasn't a voice I loved. It was my own. "Daniel," it said, "you're the last one. Let's finish this." Do you know what it feels like to hear your own voice outside your body? To hear it say things you haven't said yet? It's like your soul steps out of you and stares back. I pressed the barrel of the rifle against my chest, just to feel something solid, something real. Sloan begged me to let him free again. He said he had a plan, that he knew how to stop it. I almost believed him, until he leaned close and whispered, "All you have to do is open the door." I tightened his bindings instead. The next day, something changed in him. He stopped speaking, stopped begging, just watched me, eyes cold, mouth curled in something between a grin and a grimace. He didn't look like Sloan anymore. That evening, while I was checking the generator, I heard a metallic screech behind me, the sound of the airlock lever grinding. I sprinted back, rifle up. The airlock was wide open, and Sloan was gone. His bindings lay shredded on the floor, frayed like they'd been cut from the inside. Snow blasted into the corridor, swirling like smoke. I slammed the door, bolted it shut, but I knew it didn't matter anymore. He'd gone to it. Willingly or not, he was with it now. And that left me alone. Completely, utterly alone. That was 2 days ago. Maybe 3. I don't know anymore. The clocks don't matter. Food doesn't matter. All that matters is the sound of my own breathing in this hollow, freezing tomb. Except, it's not my breathing I hear anymore. Sometimes, late at night, when the station is silent and the generator seems to hold its breath, I hear a second rhythm beside mine. A deeper inhale. A longer exhale. Like something else is in the room, breathing with me. I checked everywhere, every corridor, every vent, every shadow. Nothing. Always nothing. But the sound follows me. It's not outside anymore. It's here. I feel it pressing at the edges, slipping into the seams of my thoughts, wearing my face in the dark glass of the porthole. Sometimes, when I blink too long, I see myself standing there on the other side, grinning. And tonight, I know it will come for me, because the last sound I heard, before I started recording this, was my mother's voice again. Not outside, not in the vents, but whispering directly into my ear. I started talking to myself, quietly at first, then louder, trying to anchor myself to whatever remained of reason. Names, dates, the stupid little facts you memorize so your head doesn't drift. My mother's favorite pie was apple. My father hated cilantro. The number of steps from my front door to the mailbox. It helped a little. It was like spelling your way out of a nightmare. But the lists didn't last. The voices curled around them and tasted them like a dog with a bone. You ever feel like you're being unwound? Like someone slowly unspooling you from the inside? That's what it felt like watching the edges of myself fray. I caught myself smiling at nothing, and then hating the smile. Regret filled me like cold water. For leaving, for not being braver, for the chances I hadn't taken in life. I thought about the things I'd never said, the apologies I'd never made. I thought about calling someone, anyone, and telling them I loved them. Just to hear a human voice that wasn't trying to lure me into the snow. The radio was dead. Or rather, it pretended to be. I spent hours sitting with the handset, fingers numb on the dials, listening to static like a man willing it into speech. Sometimes the static would thin, and I'd catch a syllable. A weather report, a laugh, and for a second my heart would leap. Then it would snap back to nothing. I began to mistrust the machine. It kept secrets. One afternoon, I think it was afternoon, I pried open a maintenance panel and crawled into the crawl space beneath the lab module. The ducts smelled old and damp, full of 1,000 small, forgotten things. I took my knife and scratched a series of marks into the metal. Tally marks for each person it had taken, for each night I'd stayed awake. It was a stupid ritual, the sort of thing men do to make sense of uncountable loss. 4 tallies for the others. 1 for Harper we'd never recovered. Then I put 1 more for Sloan. And finally, 1 for Carter. 10 marks. The numbers felt both obscene and necessary. I started setting traps. Not clever ones, nothing like the movies. Steel cables looped under snow, makeshift tripwires around the perimeter lights, a pressure plate made from an old 2x4, and a radio battery wired to an alarm. Do you think any of it mattered? I didn't either, but I needed to do something that used my hands, something physical to push back against the hum of voices. One night, the trap sang. A tiny bell I'd rigged at the far perimeter chimed once, small and polite. My chest slammed into my ribs. I grabbed my coat, rifle, and the little green lamp, and I went out. The snow was heavy, the sky a low iron lid. My headlamp carved a tunnel of light, and in the beam the world was honest and simple. White snow, black machines, my breath steaming. The bell had hung by a dead solar array. The cable had caught something and snapped. There were tracks, more of that split-toed dragging pattern leading away. And in the middle, a second set, human, smaller. A child's boot? Or a woman's? It didn't look like any of the men we'd lost. I followed them until the light blurred and my lamp began to stutter. The tracks stopped at an old supply crate, half buried in drift. Inside, I found a scrap of cloth, a child's mitten, yellowed, tiny, stiff with ice. My hands shook so badly, I dropped it and it bounced across the snow and disappeared. Why was a child's mitten here? Whose child? A microhook. What was it using to make us listen? What did this thing want with the shape of a family, of safety? I had no answer. Back inside, the base felt smaller than ever. The bell's ring had woken the thing, I thought. Or else it had been waiting, smiling in the dark. That night, the voices were different. Not just mimicry, but conversation. Two voices, overlapping. Sometimes one answering the other. One silky, coaxing, the other flat and amused, as if enjoying a new puppet. I made a terrible mistake. I started to bargain. It sounds foolish to say it aloud. Bargaining with hunger, with storms, with the dead. But when you are desperate, you offer things you don't have. I whispered to it through the vents. Take me. Take the pain. Leave me alone. Take it all. It replied by repeating my voice back to me in a slowed, lower octave that made my ribs ache. Take me, it said. We will share. The next morning, I woke with my palms raw from where I'd clawed my skin during the night. Under my nails, something dark flaked like old varnish. I thought of Sloane's face as he left, laughing or smiling or whatever it was. I thought of Harper's headlamp bobbing out of sight and never returning. Regret and guilt tasted the same. Iron. I tried to leave. Once. I packed a rucksack with canned food, a half-torn map, a flare pistol. I opened the exterior service hatch and glanced out. The snow lay compacted into ripples and low hills, like the back of a sleeping animal. The horizon was a straight, merciless line. I should have felt relief, the awful, sharp clarity of choice. But I felt only the thud of my heart and the whisper at my ear, sweet as molasses. Come back, Danny. It's warm out here. We've been waiting. I slammed the hatch shut and bolted it. My hands bled where they'd scratched the metal. I sat on the floor and sobbed, the sound ugly and animal. Part of me wanted the door open. Part of me wanted to burn the base down. Both seemed like mercy. I made one last attempt at a signal. I dragged a generator to the rooftop antenna, primed it, and tore at the cables, trying to create a pulse, a strobe, a pattern. If anyone was within 100 miles and had an eye in the sky, maybe they'd see it. Maybe they'd think of us as people again. Maybe they'd send someone. Or they'd think it was radio interference and go back to sleep. The generator coughed and coughed, then roared, then died. The antenna's frame wobbled, sparks flared, and for a moment, the whole horizon erupted in a dull electric wash, like the aurora without color. I pressed my face to the glass and mouthed names into the void until my lips cracked. When the lights died, I felt very plainly the difference between being watched and being expected. The voices were close then, not in the vents, but in the skin of the base. They pressed at the metal. One slid along my shoulder like cold fingers. I could smell winter air, though every window was fogged with my breath. I could taste the iron of fear. Sloane's last words before he walked out, or before it took him, came back to me in a loop. If it takes me, kill me. Don't let it wear me. Don't let it use me. I thought about what mercy meant, what killing your friend meant in a place like this. I had a knife. I had a rifle with one round left. I had no right to the choice. And then, during the long stretch of night that blurred into day, I heard something else. A gentle, polite sound, like someone turning a page. A hinge, creaking the way hinges do when they move slowly. Deliberately. Not the airlock, not the outer doors I knew. Something else moved. I listened as syrup-thick breath filled the corridor. And then, right behind me, the softest of taps. 3 little raps on the metal plating of the ceiling, directly above my bunk. I looked up. There was a shadow passing on the other side of the ceiling light. Long and wrong, folding like cloth. It paused. It listened. Then it pressed, small and flat, like a hand checking a door. My heart hammered so hard, I felt it in my teeth. I could have stood up. I could have run. I could have shot the ceiling, set the place on fire, done anything. Instead, I lay there and stared at the shadow and listened as the thing, whatever it was now, whatever face it wore, began to speak in my own voice, slow and coaxing and full of promises I'd once wanted. Open the hatch, Danny. Come outside. We've been waiting. The hatch above my bed clicked. The lock turned. The bar slid out. The hatch lifted half an inch with a sigh, like the whole ceiling exhaled. Frost flaked down onto my face. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body locked in that terrible half state between sleep and panic, muscles stiff, lungs frozen. The voice kept calling. My voice, softer now, patient, like it knew I couldn't resist forever. Come on, don't make me wait. The shadow rippled above me, sliding across the ceiling light, spilling into the corners like liquid night. A hand, shaped dark, pressed flat against the glass. 5 long fingers. They twitched, eager. I don't remember making the decision to move. My legs just kicked, propelling me out of the bunk and onto the frozen floor. I snatched the rifle. My thumb flicked the safety off. The hatch kept rising, inch by inch, though no hand touched it. Cold air poured down, a spill of knives against my skin. Beyond that narrow opening was not the crawl space I knew. It was a wider dark, a chasm, a night deeper than the night outside. I pointed the rifle upward, hands shaking so badly the barrel jittered. "Stay out," I croaked. My voice cracked, and the echo that came back wasn't mine. It was older, deeper, hungrier. The hatch slammed the rest of the way open. Something dropped down. I didn't see its full shape, just glimpses. A sliver of a grin too wide for a human face. The bend of a knee joint wrong in every angle. The breath, God, the breath hot and rancid, flooding the room with a rot that clung to my tongue. I fired. The shot exploded in the confined space, deafening, blinding, smoke choking me. The recoil threw me to the floor. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd won, that maybe the thing could bleed. But when the smoke cleared, the shadow was still there, and it was laughing with my voice. I scrambled backward, slamming into the steel lockers. The rifle clattered away, useless now. The thing leaned down from the hatch, its face level with mine. It wore me like a mask, my own eyes staring back, glassy and cruel, my mouth curling in a grin I've never made. It whispered, "You can't kill yourself without killing me." And that's when I understood. That's why Sloan went out smiling. That's why Carter froze with his eyes open. That's why Harper never came back. It wasn't just outside. It wasn't just knocking at the door. It was in us, in me. The base shuddered suddenly, a low moan running through the beams, as if the whole station knew what was happening and hated it. Somewhere in the dark, a metal panel tore loose and clanged. Lights flickered. The thing didn't flinch. I did the only thing left. I ran. Down the corridor, boots hammering, breath burning in my chest. Past the labs, the mess, the storage rooms. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The laughter followed anyway, chasing me, curling through the halls. My laughter. The generator room. That was my thought. Last refuge. Last chance. I burst inside, slammed the steel door, threw every latch across. My chest heaved, steam curling into the frozen air. The generator hummed, steady and strong. It was the only heartbeat left in this tomb. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I took the fuel canisters, every last one, and I spilled them across the floor. The smell of gasoline filled my nose, sharp and dizzying. My hands shook as I pulled the flare pistol from my belt. One shot, one chance. The voice pounded on the door. My voice. "Danny, open up. Let's be together. You're so tired. We could end it easy." I pressed my back to the humming generator, flare pistol aimed at the slick floor. My teeth chattered. I whispered to myself over and over, "Don't let it wear me. Don't let it wear me." The pounding grew louder. The steel groaned. I could see the bolts bending. And then, silence. For a moment, I thought maybe it had left. That maybe it had decided I wasn't worth it. Relief swept me so hard, I almost dropped the pistol. Then I heard it. Not outside, inside. The laugh. Behind me. I turned. The generator's glass panel reflected my face back at me. Only it wasn't mine anymore. The grin stretched too wide. The eyes were pits. And as I stared, the reflection winked. I didn't think. I fired. The flare roared into the gasoline. Flame erupted in a white-hot wall, swallowing the room in a scream of heat. The generator exploded like a thunderclap, ripping metal, tearing fire down every corridor. I remember flying backward, slamming into steel, my skin alight with agony. I remember the fire eating the shadows, the laughter burning away into a howl that wasn't mine. Then, darkness. I woke up outside. Snow all around me. Sky split with green aurora. The base behind me was a skeleton of fire, flames clawing into the night. I should have been dead. I should have been ash. But I wasn't. I was lying in the snow, unburned, untouched, and when I pushed myself up, I heard a sound that froze me worse than the cold ever could. Breathing. Not mine. Beside me. I turned my head, and there I was, kneeling in the snow, grinning, pouring from my mouth in long white ribbons, my double, my shadow, my curse. It leaned close, pressed its mouth to my ear, and whispered in a voice that was mine, but hollow. You can burn the station. You can bury the bodies, but you can't burn yourself out of me. And then it laughed. That's why I'm telling you this, why I'm whispering it like confession, like warning. Because if you ever find yourself snowbound, if you ever hear a knock on the door when no one should be out there, don't open it, don't answer, don't even listen. Because once it learns your voice, you'll never get it back. Never.